To bring in John Hanna, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Cheney and a senior counselor at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Sir, good morning and welcome back to our program.
Hi, Bill.
How significant?
Well, I think that remains to be determined. It was incredible political theater, and these two men have clearly established some kind of very unique relationship, but the question remains, as it has for the last year, whether that relationship can actually be put to advancing core American interests of reducing the nuclear threat out of North Korea.
They have Chairman Kim on the ropes. I think you'd agree with that. Coming out of Hanoi, he was expecting sanctions relief and did not get them. So then what next, John?
Well, I mean, we've had 4 months now in which negotiations have been in the deep freeze. Probably the most important thing coming out of this meeting is an agreement to restart those working level negotiations. The question is, does Kim actually empower his negotiators to talk about what does denuclearization look like and how do we get there? What's the roadmap? That's the next step.
There was a little bit of color provided by Tucker Carlson, who was just a few feet away from these two men. He described the health and the condition of Chairman Kim as a man who was wheezing and was in poor health. That was his casual observation, noting that he's not a doctor. Had you heard about any of this prior to this weekend?
No, that's the first I've heard of it. I mean, looking at the man, I can imagine he looks like he's got too much weight on for such a young man. Who knows what his other personal habits are, but no, hadn't heard any of this information.
Tucker also said he's a hard character. He struck me as kind of self-contained. So that's a mystery we're all trying to figure out. Wall Street Journal, here's the headline today, editorial board. The Trump doctrine. With this president, diplomacy is always personal. Here's a line from the piece, John. The symbolism was more potent than the substance. Mr. Trump is betting, as he always does, that flattery and personal engagement can persuade Mr. Kim to give up his nuclear weapons. Is that it, or is there more to it, as many would argue?
Listen, the president is clearly investing a huge amount in this personal relationship with Kim Jong-un, who, as everybody needs to remember, is a ruthless, brutal dictator who is determined to keep North Korea as a nuclear weapons state. Nothing that we've seen in the last year suggests that is going to change anytime soon. So the question is, what's the deal look like? How are we going to reduce this threat? There's some talk today, a headline in the New York Times, that maybe we're going to return to that deal that was on the table in Hanoi as an initial limited step to really get the ball rolling. Let's see what happens in these working level talks.
I think John Bolton kicked that to the curb a bit earlier today on Twitter. Let's see what happens from that. One more observation. President Xi, you don't know what the Chinese leader did on his trip to North Korea from 10 days ago, perhaps opening the door a little bit. Maybe in time it wasn't as spontaneous as it appears to be, because getting the North Koreans to act the way they did, you imagine the adjutant on behalf of a lot of the security guards. Also took note of the South Korean leader. He was not present. Do you believe that's significant in any way, John?
Sure. Listen, Kim gained enormously from this meeting. I do think we have to remember, despite the security concerns, having the President of the United States come to his doorstep, enter his country, give him that level of legitimacy while he remains a nuclear weapons state is a huge deal for him. It's being celebrated in North Korea. Having his worst adversary in the United States, John Bolton, excluded from these meetings. And, of course, having the South Korean president on the sidelines, making this a deal between the United States, the world's only remaining superpower, and Kim Jong-un holding on to his nuclear weapons is a huge deal for North Korea.
His country's starving, I think you know that. And that hip check was something else by Stephanie Grisham. John, thank you, sir. Nice to see you in Washington. Thank you for your analysis.